Open it now, you have 10 seconds. The man who said that wore a charcoal suit cut close enough to read as a uniform, and he stood a hand's breadth from Corporal Aldous Wren at the armory door, as if proximity alone could turn a key. I was 4 paces behind Wren, second on the relief that morning, and I will tell you exactly what I saw, because the official version filed afterward got the bones right and the spine wrong. The spine of it was a door, a man who would not move from in front of it, and a senior official of the House who had decided that his rank was the same thing as his right. The door behind Wren was not the kind tourists photograph. There are no gilded railings at the Westmark vault, no bearskins, no crowds with phones. It is a slab of cold iron set into the old stone of the inner keep, 2 floors below the state rooms, and it is the throat through which every weapon in the household passes. Ceremonial rifles, the older service pieces, the sealed cases that go out under escort for the funerals and the salutes, all of it sleeps behind that iron until the armorer's ledger says otherwise. We do not guard it because it is grand. We guard it because of what walks out if the wrong man decides he can walk in. My name is Theo Marsh, and I had been on the Westmark detail 11 months by then, long enough to know the rhythm of the lower keep, the armorer's morning count, the quartermaster's chit, the 2 signatures, and the time-stamped order that turned a request into a key. Long enough to know that the man in the charcoal suit, Deputy Controller Vance Orrick, head of household facilities, a name everyone below stairs knew and most feared, did not belong to that rhythm at all. He had arrived without warning at 8:20, and he had not come alone. Behind him stood 3 others. 2 I did not know, broad men in dark coats with the soft, watchful stillness of hired security, badges I could not read clipped to their lapels. The third I knew by reputation only, a tall figure with silver hair and an expensive overcoat, carrying nothing, looking at nothing, the way very important people look at rooms they expect to be handed. Orrick had introduced him on arrival with a single word, inspection, and then a longer phrase, delivered to Wren's unmoving face like a man laying a card he was certain would win. This is a VIP facilities inspection, Orrick had said. Security audit. Mr. Calder represents an interest the controller's office is obliged to accommodate. We are touring secure assets this morning. You will open the armory and stand aside while we conduct it. I trust I don't need to explain my office to a corporal. Wren had not answered. He had done the thing the Westmark men are trained to do, which looks to an outsider like nothing and is in fact a great deal. He had set his heels, squared his shoulders to the door he stood for, and let the silence say the first word. I watched Orrick's jaw tighten at that silence. He was a man accustomed to motion following his sentences, chits processed, doors held, junior staff scattering to obey. The stillness in front of him was a language he did not speak, and it offended him the way a closed shop offends a man who has never been told no. Corporal, Orrick's voice dropped, intimate, the tone men use when they mean a threat to sound like advice. I have signed off on every budget that puts a coat on your back. I can have you reassigned to a gatehouse on the moor by lunch. Open the door. Wren finally spoke, and he spoke the way our sergeant taught us to, level, unhurried, each word load-bearing. Sir, I'm not able to do that. You're not able, Orrick almost laughed. You're not authorized to think asterisk, Corporal. Opening that door when a deputy controller instructs you to is the whole of your job. Now do it, or I will find someone who understands what instructed means. Sir, Wren said, the armory opens on a quartermaster's chit and a countersigned order with the armorer present and the visit logged in advance. I haven't been given any of those things. Until I am, the door stays shut. To you, to me, to anyone. There it was, the line drawn in 4 plain sentences, and I felt the morning tilt around it. Because Orrick was not wrong about one thing. He could end a corporal's posting with a memo. He had the rank, the budget, the ear of men above us. What he did not have was the only thing that opened that particular door. And Wren had just told him so to his face, with 3 strangers watching, and a man named Calder waiting to be handed a room full of the kingdom's weapons. I saw Oric decide, in that instant, that he was going to win this anyway. "Get the override," he said over his shoulder to one of the dark-coated men. "Controller's master, we'll do this the long way since the corporal prefers it." And the man reached into his coat. I felt my own hand drift toward the radio on my belt. Not to draw anything, we carried no live weapons on the lower relief, only the radio and the whistle and the weight of the post itself, and I saw Wren register the same motion in the other man and not move at all. He stood. He breathed. His eyes did the small flick that meant he had counted the 3 of them, measured the corridor, marked the single narrow stair behind him as the only way down to the iron door, and decided he was the cork in that bottle, and would remain the cork in that bottle. "Sir," Wren said, and now he was speaking to Oric alone, cutting the dark-coated man out of it entirely. "A controller's master key opens administrative doors. It does not open this one. This lock answers to the armorer's combination and a logged order, and the armorer is not here, and there is no order. If your man puts a key in that plate, it will read as a forced attempt. The alarm will route to the watch room and the duty officer, and the keep will close above us before he's turned it twice. I'm telling you that so you understand what you'd be starting, not threatening you, telling you." For one long second, nobody moved. The dark-coated man's hand hung at the lip of his coat, waiting on Oric. Calder, the silver-haired man, watched with the mild patience of someone who had been promised this would be simple, and was beginning to find the delay distasteful. And Oric's face went through 3 colors and landed on the white of a man who has just realized the junior in front of him is not bluffing, is not frightened, and is not, in any way that matters to him this morning, alone. "You think the watch room is going to back a corporal," Oric said, "over me." "I think," said Wren, "that no one walks into the armory on a whim, not even you, sir. Especially not you." And somewhere above us, faint through 2 floors of old stone, I heard the first measured boots on the upper stair. Oric heard them too. His head turned a fraction toward the sound, and I watched him do the arithmetic that men of his kind always do, not is this right but how does this look, and to whom? He had come down the back way, the service stair, the route a man takes when he does not want to be seen at the main desk asking permission. He had brought hired coats and a guest with no business near a vault. And now there were boots on the upper stair, regular as a clock, and the budget that put a coat on my back could not call them off. He chose, the way cornered men of his rank choose, to get louder. "Stand the corporal down," he said, and now he pitched it for the corridor for Calder for the record he imagined he was making. "I am invoking facilities authority. This is an audit of secure storage under the controller's mandate. The corporal is obstructing a lawful inspection, and I am noting his name and his number for the report. Marsh, isn't it? You're the second. You've heard me give a direct order. You can open the door if your corporal won't." He had turned to me. That was his mistake, and it was the first thing that morning that I did with my whole heart. "Sir," I said, "I'm under the corporal at this post, and the corporal's right. There's no chit, no order, no armorer. I be telling you the same words he is. The door stays shut." I will not pretend I was calm. My pulse was up in my collar, and a deputy controller was writing my name down to ruin me, and some animal part of me wanted to reach for the key just to make the awful pressure stop. But I had stood 11 months beside Aldous Wren, and I had learned that the post is not a thing you defend with your nerves. It is a thing you defend with the rule, and the rule does not get nervous. The rule said, 2 signatures, the armorer, a logged order. We had none. There was nothing to be brave about. There was only the rule, and a man trying to push us off it, and the simple fact that we would not be pushed. "Then you both go," Oric snapped. "Both of you. I'll have the watch's own men hold this door, men who follow instructions." He jabbed a finger at the override in the dark-coated man's hand. "Use it." The man looked at Wren. Wren looked at the man. "Son," Ren said, and the dark-coated one was older than Ren, but the word landed anyway because it was not about age. I told the truth about that lock. The plate reads 3 failed signatures as a breach. There's no 4th try. You put that key in, and the only door that opens this morning is the one between you and a holding room. You don't work for him after that. You work for whoever takes your statement. Think about whose name is on the order to do this. Because it isn't going to be yours that the inquiry chases first. I watched the dark-coated man's eyes move to Auric and away, and I understood that Ren had not been talking to the lock at all. He had been talking to the only loyalty in that corridor that money had bought, and money's loyalty is shallow. The man's hand came out of his coat empty. He stepped back to the wall and became, very deliberately, a person who was merely present. Auric saw it. A flush climbed his neck. "You," he said to the second coat, "then you." "I'd think hard, sir," Ren said, before the second man could move, and now his voice had dropped into something I had never heard from him, not louder, lower. The register a man uses when he has stopped negotiating and is simply informing the room of facts. Because the boots you can hear are the upper relief, and behind them is the duty officer, and behind him is a procedure that does not care about your office at all. This door has a protocol. The protocol is bigger than you. It was written so that no one man, not a corporal, not a controller, not the Lord Marshal himself, can open the armory alone on a morning on a say-so. That's not an insult to your rank. That's the asterisk point of your rank meaning something. The day one man's word opens that iron, the kingdom's already lost the thing it keeps behind it. Calder spoke for the first time. "Vance," the silver-haired man's voice was smooth and bored and used to being final. "You told me this was arranged. I have a car at 9, and a man's morning is worth more than a corridor. Is it arranged or not?" And there, in the flicker of Auric's eyes toward his guest, in the half-second of pure social fear that crossed the deputy controller's face, the whole thing came apart for me into perfect clarity. It was never an inspection. There was no audit, no mandate, no order sitting unsigned on a desk because of paperwork. There was a powerful man named Calder who wanted to see, or be near, or be photographed beside the contents of the royal armory, and a household official who had promised to deliver it to him by leaning on 2 men he assumed were furniture. The VIP inspection was a sentence Auric had built to make a favor sound like a function. Ren had smelled it from the first word. No one walks into the armory on a whim. He'd said it plainly, and it had not been a slogan. It had been a description of the only world in which that door does its job. "It's arranged," Auric said to Calder, and the lie was naked now. "The corporal is simply being." "It is not arranged, sir," said a new voice from the foot of the upper stair, "and I be careful about the next word." We all turned. The duty officer had come down. Lieutenant Hadley, of the inner keep watch, a lean, gray man who had soldiered longer than Auric had signed budgets, and who wore the kind of calm that does not need to raise itself. Behind him, 2 of the upper relief filled the stairmouth, and behind them I could hear more boots still coming, unhurried, the keep doing the slow, heavy thing a keep does when a door alarm trips a procedure. Closing, sealing, accounting for every person below the line. Hadley's eyes went over the scene once Auric, the 2 coats, Calder, the override key now hanging useless in a lowered hand, Ren squared to the door, me at his shoulder, and read all of it in the time it takes to read a clock. "Corporal Ren," Hadley said without looking away from Auric, "report." "Sir, Deputy Controller Auric presented at 0820 requesting the armory be opened for a facilities inspection. No quartermaster's chit, no countersigned order, no armorer present, no advance log entry." I declined. He instructed his man to use a controller's override on the plate. I advised him the plate reads an override as a breach and would trip the keep. The door has not been opened and has not been attempted. The post is held. "Good," said Hadley. 1 word and the corridor changed temperature. Auric recovered fast, I'll give him that. Men who climb to a controller's office do not stay frightened long. They reach for the lever they know. His lever was rank and he pulled it. "Lieutenant, I'm glad you're here. Your corporal has obstructed a facility's inspection and very nearly caused a security incident through sheer rigidity. I want him relieved while this is sorted. Mr. Calder and I are conducting a sanctioned audit of secure storage, and the delay has already been." "Stop!" Hadley did not raise his voice. He simply set the word down across Oryx's sentence like a barrier. "Deputy Controller, I'm going to tell you how the next few minutes go, and I'd ask you to listen, because you've already done one thing that's hard to take back, and I'd prefer you didn't do a second. The moment a controller's override touched the consideration of being used on a sealed storage plate, this corridor became a security matter, and a security matter at this door is mine. Not yours. Your facility's authority covers boilers and budgets and the roofs over the offices. It has never once, in the history of this keep, covered the iron behind that corporal. And you know that, sir, because the protocol that excludes you was briefed to your office when you took it." I watched Oryx's mouth open and Hadley keep going. Level, relentless, each fact a stone set in a wall. "You came down the service stair," Hadley said. "Unlogged, with 2 contracted men whose badges aren't keep issued and a guest with no clearance standing 6 feet from sealed weapons. You asked for the armory to be opened on your word alone, with no chit, no order and no armorer, every single safeguard absent all at once. And when the corporal held the line he is required to hold, you instructed a forced override and threatened to have him posted to the moor." Hadley let that hang. "I'm not relieving Corporal Wren. Corporal Wren is the reason I'm not, this hour, writing a report that begins with the words unauthorized access to the Royal Armory. Are we clear on the shape of this, sir?" Calder, the silver-haired man, had gone very still during this, and now he did the thing that powerful men do when a situation stops being a favor and starts being a risk. He removed himself from it. "Vance," he said, with a cool that was almost admirable, "I think there's clearly been a misunderstanding about what you'd cleared. I'll be in my car." And he turned, and one of the upper relief stepped smoothly into the stairmouth, not blocking him exactly, but making it plain that nobody was leaving the sealed zone until the duty officer said the count was clean. "Sir," the guardsman said to Calder, polite as church, "the keep's closed on a door alarm. I'll have you escorted up the moment the lieutenant clears the floor. It won't be long." It was the smallest moment, but I have never forgotten it. The instant Calder understood that his name, his car, his 9 o'clock, and his bored impatience bought him exactly nothing down here. Below the line, in the throat of the keep, there was only the procedure, and the procedure did not know who he was and would not have cared. He sat down, eventually, on the hard bench by the wall, a man worth more than a corridor finding out that the corridor disagreed. Hadley turned back to Oryx. "You'll wait too, sir. The watch room logged the alarm consideration at 0824. The keep warden is on his way down. The armorer's been recalled. We're going to do the thing you tried to skip. We're going to do this asterisk properly. And we're going to start by establishing whether there is any order anywhere with 2 signatures on it that authorizes what you asked for. If there is, I'll apologize to you myself. If there isn't, you're going to explain to the warden why you brought a contracted detail and an uncleared guest down the back stair to open the kingdom's armory on your word." "This is absurd," Oryx said, but the steam had gone out of it. "I have run this household's facilities for 9 years. The presumption that I would." 9 years, Hadley said quietly, is exactly why everyone's going to find this hard to believe. Which is why we're going to write it all down. He nodded to one of the upper relief, and the 2 contracted men in the dark coats were drawn quietly aside, one to either end of the corridor, separated before they could agree on a story. I watched the first of them realize what that meant, that he was no longer part of a detail, that he was a witness now, and that the only currency he had left was the truth told quickly. He gave it. Hired men know which way the wind sets faster than anyone. It is the whole of their trade. "We were told it was cleared," he said to the guardsman, taking his statement low and fast. Mr. Oric said the inspection was arranged. We never saw a paper. We were told to carry the override and hold the corridor if the guard made trouble. Every word of it landed on Oric, and Oric stood there and heard his own morning narrated back to him by the men he'd paid, and could not say a thing, because the alternative to their truth was a worse truth still. That is the other thing about leaning on the wrong men. They are loyal to the lean, not to the man, and the moment the lean costs more than it pays, they set him down and step back. Wren had told them as much. You don't work for him after that, and he had been right within the minute. I should tell you what the lockdown actually was, because the word makes it sound like sirens and shouting, and it was nothing of the kind. It was a keep doing arithmetic. 2 floors above us, a steel shutter had come down over the lower keep access, soft as a curtain, and the duty desk was counting heads against the morning's entry log, and finding 2 it could not match, the contracted coats, who had come in on Oric's say-so, and a visitor's pass that did not cover the secure floors. A second relief had taken the service stair. The main desk had pinged the warden and the armorer. A line in a ledger somewhere now read door alarm, 0824 Westmark, no breach, post held. The system was not rallying like a cavalry charge. It was rallying like a body's immune response. Quiet, distributed, automatic, every part doing its small, ordained job because the door had cried out, and 100 small protocols had answered at once. That is what a real institution sounds like when it backs a man. Not a roar. A hum. A great many people, none of them in that corridor, all of them already moving to make sure the one man at the door was right to have held it. Wren had not moved through any of it. He stood squared to the iron, and when Hadley glanced at him, he gave the smallest nod, "The post is held, sir," and went back to watching the corridor as if the deputy controller of the entire household were no more remarkable than a strong wind. I understood, watching him, that this was the whole of his discipline. Not that he felt no fear, not that the threat to his posting meant nothing, but that none of it could reach the place where the rule lived, because he had given that place to the door a long time ago, and a man cannot be moved off a thing he has already decided is not his to surrender. The keep warden came down at 20 to 9. He was a wide, weathered man named Brant, in the dark coat of the senior household, and he came without hurry, which is its own kind of authority. Behind him came the armorer, Master Sella, a small, precise woman with the ledger of the lower keep under her arm like a priest with a book. They reached the corridor, and Brant took in the scene exactly as Hadley had: the coats, the override, the seated and increasingly small figure of Calder, the white-faced Oric, and the 2 of us at the door. And then he did the single thing that decided the morning. He walked past Oric without a word, stopped in front of Corporal Wren, and looked at the door. "Tell me it's shut," Brant said. "It's shut, sir," said Wren, "untouched, not attempted." "And the order?" "There is none, sir. No chit, no countersignature, no advance log, no armorer until just now. I declined the request and held the post." Brant nodded slowly and turned to Master Sella. "Armorer, is there anything at all in your authorizations for this morning?" Sella opened the ledger. She did not need to look long. Nothing, warden. No movement scheduled at Westmark today. No inspection logged this week or pending. The vault was counted at 0630 and sealed. There is no authority of any kind for it to be opened today by anyone. Brant closed his eyes for a moment, the way a man does when a fear he carried into a room turns out to be exactly as large as he feared. Then he opened them and looked at the deputy controller. "Vance," Brant said, and the use of the first name was not warmth. It was the sound of a man speaking to someone he had known for years and was about to stop trusting forever. "I'm going to give you one chance to make this small. Who is the gentleman on the bench, and why did you bring him down the service stair to my armory?" For a moment I thought Oric would try the lie again. I watched it form behind his eyes, the audit, the mandate, the misunderstanding. But a lie needs a room that hasn't already counted the ledger, and this room had. Master Sella's book was open. Hadley's report was already in his head, dated and timed. The two contracted men had peeled away to the wall and would, I had no doubt, give whatever statement kept them clear of the chase. There was nothing left for Oryx's lie to stand on. "Mr. Calder," Oryx said at last, and his voice had lost all its weight, "is a private associate. He has interests in historical arms. He wished to view the ceremonial collection." There was no harm intended. It was a courtesy, Warden, a favor between. Favor. Brant did not shout. I almost wished he had. The quiet was worse. "You used a controller's override key, brought hired men with no keep clearance, and tried to lean 2 of my guardsmen off the door of the Royal Armory, so that a private collector could be walked past the kingdom's weapons as a courtesy." He let the words sit there, ugly and exact. "Do you know what would have happened if these 2 had been the men you took them for? If the corporal had been the kind who opens a door because a frightened junior is more afraid of a deputy controller's memo than of the rule? You'd have walked an uncleared man into a sealed armory, off the books, on a forced override, with no armorer and no order. And the first anyone above you would have known of it is when something went missing, or when a photograph turned up, or when a court asked who exactly was responsible for the security of the household's arms." He shook his head once. "You didn't just try to bend a rule, Vance. You tried to prove the rule was a suggestion, and the only reason it wasn't is that man." He turned and looked at Wren. So did everyone. And Wren, to his eternal credit, did the only correct thing a guardsman can do when a keep warden turns the weight of an entire household onto him in a corridor. He stood straighter, kept his eyes forward, and said nothing at all, because the door did not need him to make a speech. It needed him to keep standing in front of it, and he was. What happened to Oryx happened the way these things happen in a real institution, which is to say not with a dramatic flourish but with paperwork and patience, and the slow closing of every door he had spent 9 years assuming would always open for him. Brant did not have him dragged anywhere. He said, "You'll come with me to the warden's office, and you'll bring nothing and touch nothing, and you'll give a full account to me and to the household security board before the day is out. The override key is forfeit as of now." A guardsman took it from the dark-coated man's slack hand and bagged it, and noted the time. "Mr. Calder will be escorted to the upper hall and asked, courteously, to wait for a member of the board, who will want to understand exactly what he was told and by whom. The contracted men will give statements before they leave the keep. And Master Sella will conduct a full reconciliation count of the Westmark vault this morning, witnessed, signed, and sealed, so that there is never a question, not in a year, not in 10, that a single round or a single rifle left this floor on the day Vance Oryx decided the protocol didn't apply to him. It was thorough, it was unhurried. It was, I understood even then, the system rallying in its truest form, not a convoy at the gates, not a wall of armed men, but an institution methodically making the wrong impossible to bury and the right impossible to deny. Every safeguard Oryx had tried to skip came back, one by one, and each one of them now had his name attached to the morning it was nearly skipped. Calder rose from his bench when the upper relief came for him. He paused, just for a second, in front of Wren, and I tensed, because powerful men sometimes save their cruelty for the moment they're losing. But Calder only looked at the corporal with something I could not at first name, and then I recognized it. It was the wary respect a predator gives a fence that turns out to be electrified. "You'd have lost your posting," Calder said softly, almost curious. "If he'd had the order he claimed, you'd have been on the moor by lunch, and you stood there anyway." "There was no order," Wren said, "so there was nothing to lose, sir. The door was always going to stay shut. The only question was how much trouble you all wanted to make for yourselves first." Calder almost smiled. Then the guardsman touched his elbow, and the silver-haired man went up the stair and out of our morning and, I later heard, out of any room in that household for good. The board's quiet word to the right people saw to it that an associate who would let himself be walked into a royal armory as a favor was no longer the kind of associate doors opened for. Auric went last. He had to pass within a foot of the door he'd come to open, and within a foot of the two of us who had not let him, and I will admit I expected one final threat. "I'll remember this, Marsh. I'll remember your number," the parting shot of a man who still believes his memo can reach us. But he didn't say it. He had seen, I think, the same thing I had. That the boots on the stair and the ledger in Sella's hands and the warden's slow certainty were never things his office could touch, and that the corporal at the door had not been one stubborn man he could break, but the visible edge of an entire institution that did not answer to him and never had. He looked at Wren for a long moment, and whatever he found there made him look away first. Then he went up the stair under escort, and the steel shutter rose to let him through, and somewhere a clerk began the report that would, by the end of that week, end his 9 years in the household, not in scandal, not in headlines, but in the quiet, complete way that an institution closes ranks against a man who tried to teach it that its rules were optional. The board found no order because there was no order. They found a service stair entry because he had used the service stair. They found an uncleared guest because he had brought one. Every fact lined up behind Corporal Wren, because Wren had done nothing all morning but stand where the facts already were. When the floor finally cleared and the count came back clean, every rifle, every case, every round present and accounted for, the vault never once opened, Hadley came back down to release the post. He stood in front of Wren for a moment, and the two old soldiers looked at each other the way men do who have just watched a thing nearly go very wrong and not. "You knew about the Moor," Hadley said. "It wasn't quite a question." "I knew he could try, sir." "And you stood there." "There wasn't anything else to do, sir," Wren said. "The door wasn't mine to give him. It was never going to be a question of what I wanted. The protocol decided it the day it was written. I just had to be the man standing where the protocol already said no." Hadley nodded slowly. "There'll be a board," he said. "You'll both give statements. It'll be a formality. Sella's ledger and the entry log have already written the ending. But I want it on the record properly, because what you did this morning is the thing the whole keep is built on and almost nobody ever has to actually do. A man came down those stairs with rank and budget and a powerful guest and the absolute certainty that you'd fold. And you told him no, with nothing in your hand but the rule. That's the post, Corporal. That's the whole post." He turned to me. "And you, Marsh. He turned to you because he thought the junior would crack. You didn't." "I had the corporal in front of me, sir," I said, which was true, but it was not the whole of it, and Hadley knew it. "You had the corporal in front of you," he agreed. "And the corporal had the rule in front of him, and the rule had the kingdom behind it. That's how it's supposed to work. One man can't hold a door against a deputy controller, but one man standing on the protocol can hold it against anyone because he isn't standing alone, he's just the part of the wall you can see." He almost smiled. "Stand your relief out. The armorer wants the post manned while she finishes the count. Then I'll have you both up for tea and statements in that order." So we stood our relief out. The shutter stayed down until Sella had counted the last case and pressed her seal into the wax of the new entry, witnessed and timed. And then it rose, and the lower keep breathed again. And the morning that had nearly become the worst day in the keep's modern history became instead a line in a ledger that said * no breach, post held, which is the highest praise that ledger ever gives, and the only kind a guardsman should want. I have thought about that morning many times in the years since, and the thing I keep coming back to is not the override key, or Calder's wary respect, or even Brandt's quiet ruin of a man he'd known for 9 years. It is the 4 sentences Wren gave Auric at the very start, before the boots, before the warden, before any of the weight arrived to back him. The armory opens on a quartermaster's chit and a countersigned order with the armorer present and the visit logged in advance. I haven't been given any of those things. Until I am, the door stays shut. To you, to me, to anyone. To me, That was the part Auric never understood, and the part that, I think, finally beat him. He had spent his whole approach trying to find the angle, the rank that would override Ren, the threat that would frighten him, the favor that would tempt him. He never once grasped that Ren had taken himself out of the equation entirely. The corporal had no power to open that door either. He had not been holding it shut against Auric out of stubbornness or spite or even courage exactly. He had been holding it shut because he, too, was on the wrong side of the rule, and the rule did not bend for the man standing guard any more than it bent for the man in the charcoal suit. You cannot bribe a man who owns nothing you want. You cannot frighten a man off a thing he has already agreed isn't his. And you cannot break a wall by leaning on one stone, when every other stone in the wall is set behind it. That is the secret of the post, and it is why the protocol forbids one man, any one man, from opening that iron alone. Not because guardsmen aren't trusted, because trust is precisely the thing you do not leave to a single morning, a single mood, a single official with a budget and a guest and a hurry. The protocol is the kingdom saying, through the corporal at the door, no one walks into the armory on a whim, not the powerful, not the junior, not the man you'd never suspect. The rule protects the guard as much as the guard protects the rule. And a household that understands that backs the corporal over the controller, the ledger over the rank, the closed door over the loud man in front of it, is a household whose arms will still be where it left them tomorrow. There was a small thing afterward that I'll set down, because it stayed with me more than the board's findings did. About a week later, when Auric was gone and the keep had gone back to its ordinary rhythm, the Lord Marshal came down to Westmark on his quarterly walk. He does that, comes down to the lower keep without ceremony, looks at the door, exchanges a word with whoever holds it. That week it was Ren's relief on the Morning Post, and the marshal stopped and looked at the iron and asked the corporal the same question he always asks. Anything to report? And Ren, who could have said a great deal, who had a week before told the second most powerful administrator in the household no asterisk to his face, and watched an institution close around the word and make it law, said only what guardsmen say. Post held, sir, all quiet. The marshal nodded and looked at the door a moment longer than he usually did, and I understood that he knew that the whole keep knew by then, and that the knowing was exactly why he did not make a speech about it either. You do not praise a wall for being a wall. You simply note with quiet gratitude that it held when something heavy leaned on it, and you walk on, and you let it go back to the only work it has ever wanted, which is to stand. Carry on, the marshal said. Sir, said Ren. And the door stayed shut, the way it had through everything, the way it was built to, the way it would tomorrow, because no one walks into the armory on a whim, and the morning a deputy controller tried to prove otherwise. A corporal who owned no power to open it proved, instead, exactly how much power there is in a man who will not.